Welcome back to Reclining at Table with Jesus. We are finishing our last session in Luke chapter 9 as Jesus is praying with Peter, James and John on the Mount of Transfiguration. We've seen Moses and Elijah turn up with Jesus and the disciples falling asleep and then waking up. And then we've seen God the Father come in a cloud and speak in verse 34 as the cloud overshadows them, and he speaks then in verse 35, "This is my son, my chosen one, listen to him." And now in verse 36, when the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone with Peter, James and John, and they kept silent and told no one in those days anything of what they had seen. So what can we learn about the prayer life of Jesus here in verse 36? Well, prayer is all about finding Jesus. That's the whole point in verse 36 of our prayer life. People will come and go like Moses and Elijah. The experiences of Jesus being transfigured will come and go. But what we must always seek for in our prayer lives, whether individually or collectively, is that we would find Jesus alone in verse 36. Jesus was found alone. Or as Mark 9 verse 8 says, Jesus only. So let's make sure that when we come to prayer, both individually or corporately, we're always seeking to find Jesus. Let us never come away from the place of prayer, whether in our closet or in the church, without meeting the risen Jesus. Jesus says, if you seek me with all your heart, you will find me. You see this on two different occasions with Jesus' family in Luke's Gospel. In Luke chapter 2, Jesus goes with his family up to Jerusalem to the temple when he's 12 years of age, and you'll see that from verse 41 and 42 onwards. But the parents are probably with a large group of people. They leave in Jerusalem and they realize Jesus is not with them. So they return to Jerusalem looking for Jesus. And it says in verse 48, when his parents saw him, they were astonished. And the mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you." And that's what it means to be a Christian, and what it means to come to prayer is that we are searching for Jesus. Whether in prayer or in the temple, we are searching for him. The same thing goes on in chapter 8 and verse 20, when Jesus' mother and his brothers, no mention of Joseph, the earthly dad, possibly has passed away. But in verse 19 of chapter 8, his mother and his brothers came to him, but they could not reach him because of the crowd. And notice verse 20, what they want. And Jesus was told, "Your mother and your brothers are standing outside, desiring to see you." Desiring to see you. So what it means to come in prayer in chapter 9 and verse 36 is that we find Jesus. So please don't leave the place of prayer until you know that you have met with Jesus. So what can we learn quickly? I got two ends for you here in verse 36 to find Jesus only. When we do find Jesus only, we'll often realize that actually prayer is normal. Prayer is normal. What do I mean by that? Well, the cloud is gone. All these great experiences have gone. Okay, Jesus is no longer glowing like the sun in all of its brilliance. He's returned to conceal his glory. Moses and Elijah have gone. God the Father's gone, and they're left with Jesus only, the normal, fleshly Jesus. And sometimes prayer is just normal. Sometimes we have the high experiences which we should want and expect, but often for the Christian, okay, things are just normal in our prayer life, and it's Jesus only. And we don't have the clouds and the voices, and we don't have the Elijahs and the Moses. It's Jesus only, and things are normal. But when the experiences leave us, notice here Jesus never leaves us. Experiences may leave us, but in prayer, Christ will never leave us. So let's be a people who can live with the supernatural, but also with the normal prayer life of a saint. And although we want to eat, a feast of food, we have to be content with our daily bread and the normal life. I was just thinking through Elijah the other day, and when the ravens brought him food, he had meat and water. And when he went to the widow of Zarephath, it was just bread that he had. And the prophets in the cave that Obadiah looked after, all they had was bread and water. So though we want to feast, we want to eat the grapes from the promised land, the milk and the honey, and we should expect them things. Often the Christian life is the normal bread and water. So don't overlook the small, normal Christian life. When all the experiences go in, can we sustain and endure on the bread and the water on a daily occasions? So also expect the normal in verse 36, and let's be thankful for our daily bread. Also notice the number. Sometimes the number, prayer is just not normal, but the number of people now dwindle. Moses and Elijah have gone. God the Father has stepped back in a good sense, and it's Jesus, Peter, James and John. And sometimes God dwindles down numbers in the prayer meeting for a particular reason. So when experiences go and people go, Jesus doesn't go. I will never leave you nor forsake you. So even if the numbers go smaller in our prayer meetings, as long as Jesus is there, let's be there. But let me just say, why does the Lord do that? Why is it Jesus found only? Why do numbers sometimes dwindle? And I was just thinking of Gideon back in Judges chapter 7, where God calls like 30,000 people to gather around this judge Gideon, and God says the numbers are too much in chapter 7 verse 2, and you know the story of how God dwindles the number down to 300, and then God gives victory through the 300. But God gives the reason of why he does this in chapter 7 of Judges and verse 2, and this is what he says: lest the Israelites boast in their numbers, that the victory is from them, and that they saved themselves, and salvation did not come from me. So sometimes God dwindles the numbers down, so we know that it's Jesus that gives the victory and not our numbers. You'll see this again in 1 Kings and chapter 18, as Elijah is on Mount Carmel. He will say to King Ahab, you gather your prophets and we'll have a showdown on Mount Carmel. And in chapter 18 and verse 19, he says there were 450 prophets of Baal and there were 400 prophets of Asherah. So if that's my calculation correct, there's 850 false prophets and one prophet from the Lord, Elijah. And God sometimes dwindles the numbers down to show that the Lord is God in verse 37 of 1 Kings 18, and that the Lord is turning the heart of the people back to him. So sometimes the Lord dwindles down numbers to show that salvation belongs to him and not towards numbers or to man's abilities, who is sufficient, for the task ahead. Well, our sufficiency comes from the Lord. So to round it up on the Mount of Transfiguration, when you come to the place of prayer, even though we should expect great experiences and great voices, often we will be found with Jesus only. And I pray that he is enough for you. So remember, the prayer can be normal, and sometimes he dwindles numbers down so that we can see that salvation belongs to him. So I pray that you will search for him and you will find him in your prayer life. So may the Lord bless you today. Amen.